Some of you may already know Carl as a highly successful executive in the media, telecom, and sports industries. But he remains best known to all of us at St. Norbert College as a hard-hitting first baseman and all-conference designated hitter for the Green Knights baseball team. Yeah. By the way, do you know your photograph hangs at the Schuldes Sports Center? It didn't recognize it, okay. Your hair was a little darker then, I think. Carl graduated from St. Norbert in 1979 with a degree in accounting, and he would go on to a distinguished business career in the loftiest precincts of sports entertainment. He is currently a partner with SCP Worldwide, a sports entertainment and media company that owns the National Hockey League St. Louis Blues and the 2009 MLS Cup champion Real Salt Lake soccer team. The SCP group also has been vying for ownership of the St. Louis Rams football team. A former president of EchoStar Communications, Carl in 1994 helped found Dish Network, which was created to develop EchoStar's direct broadcast satellite business. At Dish and EchoStar, Carl was responsible for all strategic matters, investments, media and advertising sales, corporate development, and programming negotiation. Indeed, his experience ranges from structuring complex financial transactions to M&A deals, from attracting investment capital to content creation and negotiating with networks, cable, and satellite operations. Carl and his wife Carol, and Carol is also with us. We're delighted to have you back in Green Bay, Carol. They live in the Denver area, and they have 5 grown children. Carl has succeeded so well in part because he is a very practical person, and as I said, he got to thinking that after 2 days you have probably heard plenty of formal presentations, so he decided to take a little bit different tack. He's going to spend a few minutes talking to you with some observations about the business of sports, specifically I think sports rights fees, but then he's going to be joined by another guest of ours for a little more freewheeling Q&A, and I'm pleased to say that facilitating that discussion will be Mr. Rick Burton. Rick writes for the Sports Business Journal, and prior to that, he was Chief Marketing Officer for the United States Olympic Committee for the Beijing 2008 Olympics. But prior to that, done some really interesting things as well. He was at Miller Brewing for a while. He is the former, unless he was lying to me, he is ostensibly the former commission of the Australian Pro Basketball League. Did we get that right? Is that provable anywhere, Rick? Got it. And he also teaches the business of sports marketing for Syracuse University. So would you please welcome Mr. Carl Vogel and Mr. Rick Burton.
Trip Maher asked me if I would really come out with my batting average, and I said yes, I would. My batting average and my grade point average both started with a 2, so, but we'll just leave it at that. But I'd like to thank Tom Kunkel, Mike Marsden, certainly Kevin Quinn. We spent a lot of time talking about what might be relevant to the audience, so hopefully we get a little bit right, and certainly Mark Murphy as well from the Packers. It's great to be here. I am going to talk a little bit about sports rights fees. I used to have great eyes. I have horrible eyes now, so I have to take off my glasses to read. But I think that, I have been fortunate. I left St. Norbert in 1979, which was really kind of the start of the media, cable, and satellite business as we know it today. Many of you may or may not know that ESPN was founded in 1979, and the guy that runs ESPN actually was a driver and in the mailroom, George Bodenheimer. So there's a lot of us that amazingly got into this industry and actually did it okay. But if you look back at those days, I think the growth of the cable industry and the growth of the satellite industry has been part and parcel of the growth that we've seen in the media rights business. When you think back about it, the game of the week was all we watched. We had broadcast television to enjoy the Packers. Carol and I in New London got that out of both Wausau and Green Bay. But I think what we've seen is cable has been inextricably linked to sports, and sports has been inextricably linked to the cable and satellite industry. And the TV rights fees are the valuation, are the fuel and the valuation of all of our businesses. I think that sometimes, though, we lose sight of really what happens in our business, and that is most of our sports rights fees are borne by us as consumers in the form of fees that we pay to the cable or satellite provider that we choose. It's collected by those distributors. It's then paid to the networks. It then finds its way to the conferences or the leagues, and then that money is shared by those that actually own those rights. So there's a fair number of distribution points and a fair number of profit points in that equation. And I think one thing that those of you that are interested in the sports business and those of you that are in academics can certainly understand that there's a few layers of overhead in that process and numerous layers of profit. And I think one of the things that we'll see as we go forward is you're going to see more and more situations where distributors deal directly with content owners who deal directly with consumers. One of the things that I want to just give you a little background on is kind of the history of sports rights fees. Believe it or not, pro sports and cable launched in 1980 on USA Network, of all places, now the home of the WWE and the WWF. The core programming was NBA content, and they paid $3 million a year for the license fee. I think we pay $3 million every 3 days to USA now, based on our 14 million subscribers. So the economics have clearly changed. If you look at the NFL, I think that's probably the most interesting thing, and Paul Tagliabue deserves a tremendous amount of credit for what he's done in terms of value in that sport. But in 1987, the year ESPN entered the NFL business, the rights fees were $473 million a year. In the 1990-93, which was the next negotiation period, they went to $900 million a year, 2x. Nice little growth rate. We don't have that in media. It's not bad, but it's not that good. 1994 to 97, there was a little downturn in the economy. It went for $1.1 billion. Satellite and DirecTV entered in 1997, opened up a whole new opportunity for any sports rights with their out-of-market packages. And the NFL rights went from $1.1 billion to $2.2 billion a year. And I was an accountant, so that's 2x. And so that tells you what happened with sports rights fees. And the current contract is now $3.1 billion, a 41% increase. So those of you that are in business or those of you that are in academics, those are growth rates you really don't see in any other industry. And it really was part and parcel of the power of the brand, the NFL Shield, the quality of the product, the growth of the cable and satellite industry. The NBA had similar types of growth rates, certainly not at the level of the NFL. But I think the challenge going forward is really what's going to happen next. What's technology going to do to this? What does the future really hold? Will consumers really continue to pay increasing cable rates? I mean, it's a dialogue that goes on constantly in my business. We all kind of have, it's like a long-term marriage. You know, you kind of know each other and you kind of like each other, but there's certain things that kind of grate on you, but you just keep fighting on because it's just what you do. Not, honey, I don't mean that. I mean, it's been all sweetness, and it's generic. But I think it's a very delicate balance that we can't lose sight of. And being in the sports business, being in hockey and soccer, which has horrible rights deals, but we'll leave that alone for a moment, I think will distributors think about differentiating themselves by choosing not to carry certain content? And what does that do to a consumer? Because you look at the ratings and the lion's share of your programming costs can be attributed to the multiple brands of ESPN and your regional sports network and the NFL network and other league-related networks. And the viewership does not track the sharing of the revenue. So there could be an economic environment that changes that I think we all need to think about that are in the sports business. I think the other question is, will networks continue to compete for sports rights? Will they continue to use the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball as ways to differentiate themselves both to advertisers and consumers? We were talking a little bit about this at dinner. I think the NFL is in probably pretty good shape based on the quality of the product and, frankly, the season. From a television standpoint, 18 weeks is a lot easier to deal with than 162 baseball games. And the other question, I think, is if things don't work out, what level of government intervention will we see? And I'm a libertarian, which means I'm a Republican that has has been audited by the IRS. So that's what a libertarian is. Audited, that's all. But at any rate, I think that there are very interesting questions out in front of us, but I will tell you, I think I am probably the luckiest guy in the world that I ended up at St. Norbert, the luckiest guy in the world that I ended up in New London and met my wife, and I've had a great career that was really based on a lot of principles that I learned here in Northeast Wisconsin. So I really appreciate being here. I think Rick and I are going to bang some things around, and we would hope that you all would ask us questions as well. We may not have the answers, but we'd certainly like to entertain questions from the audience as well. And as President Kunkel said, we're 20 or so minutes out from getting you guys off to the next event. But again, I appreciate you inviting me here. It's an honor to be here, and look forward to spending a little bit more time.
All right, well, our interview style is to treat this as if we were sitting at the Abbey. And,
never been there.
Yeah, I didn't think so. And as if we were talking over a few beers. So let's talk about, just in terms of general context, most folks would know that if you watch sports on an over-the-air network, NBC, ABC, CBS, that the only way that those rights are being paid for is through advertising. So they have a single revenue stream. Cable introduces the second revenue stream and makes properties like ESPN that much more profitable and gives them that much more license to bid for rights. Where's it going in the future? Is there a third revenue stream, or are the networks as we know them, CBS, NBC, and ABC, are they going to become dinosaurs?
Well, I think that when you look at CBS, NBC, and ABC, you have to remember that ABC owns ESPN through Disney. So I think they've got a fairly good hedge against the business. NBC, which is about to be bought by Comcast, has a significant presence in regional sports and in cable distribution. CBS, although they cry foul, has done fairly well in what's called retransmission consent fees, which you may or may not have read. I noticed there's some people here from Time Warner. I know they feel the same way I feel about retransmission consent, right? We already pay for this stuff. Why are we paying for it again? Thank you. But that being said, but I think that what we're going to see in the industry, like it or not, the broadcasters, frankly, that own sports rights fees, are going to come to the distributors and ask for retransmission consent fees to create a similar dual revenue stream that cable has had for years. I think what people tend to forget about cable is that ESPN, before they had the NFL, paid the distributor. That's a long time ago. That was right after I got out of college, about '83. We now pay them, but it's a good product. But also, the cable operators and the satellite providers also get a piece of their advertising inventory that allow us to offset a portion of their license fees. So it's not perfect, but I think as distributors, I think we're all prepared to see the broadcaster come to us and ask us for retransmission consent fees, which will be, publicly, broadcasters have said they'd like 50 cents per broadcast channel per market. That's $2. That's not insignificant. I don't know anybody that's in the distribution business that's going to bear that cost on their own. So that's eventually going to get passed on to the consumer. So again, the cycle continues, but I think the fact that there's cross-ownership amongst a number of broadcasters with cable assets, and there's a propensity to continue to charge for retransmission consent fees, that playing field, if not already level, is level. The one thing I didn't say is when you look at the NFL contract, which is about $20 billion in the current cycle, I think $8.8 billion of that is ESPN, and the remainder is broadcast rights fees. So it's not like it's way out of whack that the ESPN and other cable providers are in a position that they can close out the broadcast provider in the market. And I think anybody that owns a team wants some of their content on broadcast because it's the greatest reach and is the best service you can provide to your fans.
For the students in the room, you are getting a graduate seminar in the DNA of sport. And not sure whether you're taking notes, but appreciate the fact that you really are getting some sophisticated and high-level information relative to this topic. So let's stay in this vein for a moment. Were you surprised by CBS's bid with Turner to lock up the NCAA, because being in a community that is probably largely interested in college sports, I think a lot of people would have expected ESPN to win that. ESPN didn't go to $900 million. So let's talk about what you think about CBS and Turner partnering up for those rights.
Well, I think we all like March Madness. I mean, anybody, I think, gets kind of caught up in that whole thing. And I know there's some folks here from Intersport, and Charlie Besser, that is March Madness. Yeah, Charlie coined the name, sued at CBS and won. Love the guy. But at any rate, I think that, you know, it's interesting that ESPN, and frankly, it's somewhat gratifying from a distributor standpoint that they said enough is enough. And when you look at ESPN, I think they've done a fabulous job with college sports when you think about it. You know, Dick Vitale was the University of Detroit coach who got fired. And, you know, he's awesome, baby. You know, so it just tells you the power of the brand. And I think ESPN has done an outstanding job for college sports and football, basketball, and even some of the other sports. And they certainly had the platform to put the content on in terms of ESPNU, which is another service that they have. But I'm glad that they held the line economically. Now, what does that mean going forward for Turner? I don't think we know exactly who's getting what games in terms of what round of the tournament. But I think it will be very difficult for Turner to pass a surcharge onto an operator for those incremental games, given that the preponderance, I think, of the tournament will still be on CBS. And what often happens in our business, if a programmer goes out and buys a piece of content, and a piece of content may be the 8-game NFL package, or it may be 40 NBA games, they generally come back to the operator and say, hey, I improved my product, now I want to surcharge you for those incremental games. And in many cases, you know, as operators, we'll accept that because it's of value to our consumers. In this particular case, because it's only 2 to 3 weeks, I think you'll see a little pushback from the operators on that front. And I'm glad to see that ESPN has shown discipline, at least in the pricing of that product. I won't say they've shown discipline in other product, but I think they're pretty good at what they do.
We'll stay with college for 20, and Carl and I had known each other for all of about 20 seconds when I asked him about the realignment of the Big Ten and whether or not we'd see the same with the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, and the Pac-10, whether we would go to 5 or 6 conferences with 16 teams, all kind of looking to create maybe a Big Ten network situation or looking to really leverage certain markets to maybe drive their economic feasibility. So let's talk conferences. Who's going into the Big Ten? Let's turn this into Mike and Mike. Are we going to see Missouri and Nebraska in the Big Ten?
Well, certainly not Nebraska, because from where I stand, there's only one Big Red, and that would be the University of Wisconsin. So that's not happening.
Go you Badgers.
There you go.
All right.
So they're off the list. But I think, you know, the Big Ten Network, I think, has done a very good job from a product standpoint. I mean, the production quality is good. But I think the Big Ten as a conference has depth beyond football and basketball. And we see that as distributors. I mean, hockey's not bad down in Madison. And hockey's not too bad at Michigan and Michigan State either. I would point out that the University of Denver has been a 2-time national champion in the last 4 years, but that's a different issue.
Yes, they have. And they ski pretty well.
Yeah, they're not bad. They're all Norwegian, but hey, they're not bad. But yeah, St. Norbert. In fact, we got to get them on TV. We got to get college. Well, they were on CSTV for the national championship. We enjoyed that. My kids thought I was joking that I actually went to that school at the time. But, you know, I did graduate. The diploma's in there somewhere. But I think the Big Ten is in a unique position, and I think will they add teams? I think they will, and I think they will where they need probably strategic distribution. I mean, as ironic as it seems, I mean, Rutgers would be a good ad because they're in a very big media market.
But doesn't that assume that people in New York actually care about college sports?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But from my standpoint in my business, I think it enhances the value of the network, and it gives a differentiated product to a satellite distributor or a cable operator, frankly, a phone company that's in that market. So, I mean, I'm not a big fan of total conference realignment where there's, you know, 6 super conferences and and the games are dominated by the top 25 teams. I don't think that's necessarily good for the fan or good for the sport in the long run. On the other end, from a distributor standpoint, I just as soon see that content on services I already pay for. Make ESPNU better. And I think that's what the SEC did. And I think that may be what the Big 12 does. But I think it's very intoxicating for a conference, with all due respect to university presidents, to be in the media business. And from a distributor standpoint, it's always nice to have additional product that you can differentiate yourself from one distributor to another. But it's also a lot better to have more quality product on the networks you already carry, because it keeps the cost structure, I think, a little bit more in line than otherwise. So we'll see what happens.
I need a question from a St. Norbert student so that you can use this in a job interview in a few months or next year, where you say, I was talking to Carl Vogel the other day, and I asked him about, so one of you St. Norbert students over here, I want you to stand up shortly, show your colors, and ask something meaningful. You ready? Fire away.
What do you think about with the BCS, both from a restructuring and marketing point of view?
So BCS and a restructuring point of view. It seems to be a pretty open-ended, wide-ranging question.
I don't get the BCS. I kind of agree with the guy from Boise State. It doesn't really make sense to me when, and I live in the West, when Utah has a great season or Boise State has a great season, they run the table, and Florida State at 7-4 is in a major bowl game. Especially the money that's involved that then flows to the conference. It's not just the team that gets hosed; it's the entire conference, and because I think the economics are widely spread, and I think the BCS, although not a bad idea in concept, has been over politicized in many levels.
So as a Republican, you're pleased to see that the President of the United States is going to get involved with the BCS and in bringing LeBron to Chicago.
Yeah, I'm thrilled.
All right.
I might add, I have dual Canadian citizenship, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Exactly that.
I think you should go to Toronto.
There may be another audit coming your way. Big topic during the course of the last 2 days, and a tip of the hat to Kevin Quinn. He's done such a great job, and we should give it up for him at least once, and we may do it again before we're done. But social networks, blogging, tweeting, Facebooking, YouTubing. I'm probably missing a few of the newer versions that a lot of people in the room have no idea what I've just said. Where's social networking going to go? And how does it take down the existing networks? I mean, should we fear, what's the old line, fear the person in the room kind of thing?
Well, given that I don't tweet, I don't have a Facebook account, but I am addicted to my BlackBerry, I may not be the best to ask. But I think social media is certainly a way for teams to interact with fans. And I think anything this is more from a team and a network standpoint, that people can do to get your fans more attached and loyal to your brand is positive. If tweeting, I don't get guys tweeting from the locker room. I mean, I have a hard time with that one. But I think Facebook is an interesting play. I've recently been exposed to ESPN's Facebook site, and some of the things that they do, and it's pretty interesting. In fact, they did something that I didn't really appreciate. They have a big event called ESPN The Weekend down at Disney World. They have all their anchors down there, all their sponsors down there. It's a boondoggle basically, but they transmit SportsCenter, they transmit Baseball Tonight, they transmit a lot of their content from there. And what I found is the same guys that they would interview on SportsCenter, there'd be a guy there with a camera, happened to be my son, and then do an interview with that particular individual to just do a shout out on Facebook. And it wasn't an interview, it was like, one guy that my son interviewed is Steven Jackson. He's the guy with the Rams with the dreads, great dude. I had one of those when I was at St. Norbert, actually. Right?
You had dreads?
Sort of.
Okay.
I had dreads in the day. But
this was before Carol met you.
But no. I've known her since I was 15. It's amazing. But what I thought was interesting is he didn't talk about training camp, and he didn't talk about the details of being an NFL player. He talked about him more the person. which again I think creates a dimension that you don't often see in a broadcast or cable environment. So to the extent that social media can get fans more engaged, and will it be a revenue stream that displaces $20 billion NFL contracts? I don't think so, not in my lifetime. But it is something that it's additive, that can create incremental revenue for a league or a network or a team or even an individual. I think it's a good product, and I think there's certainly more of that interaction going on than certainly we've seen in my generation.
Got a question over here on the right-hand side of the room. Do you want to give us your name and your affiliation, and if you're with the media, so that we know how to buffer our answers?
My brother Pat went to St. Norbert, did not graduate here, but he was here when Lambeau Field was being built. He has a lot of fond memories, which he won't tell me anything about.
He was at the Abbey.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The question is, I talked to your man you know well, Charlie Ergen,
Oh,
about getting my movie put on the satellite network someplace on there, and I thought Major League Baseball would be a great one. And Charlie's answer to that was pretty much that he didn't ever see Major League Baseball coming on satellite dish because it was going to be a pretty much an internet-based programmer.
We could make it an internet play. Okay. Did everybody hear that? Kind of a question about baseball possibly mutating over from network television into solidly an internet engagement, if you will, so that you'll watch your baseball game, the team you're interested in, online. And Major League Baseball is doing some of that right now with MLBAM, Major League Baseball Advanced Media.
Yeah, I think, I obviously know Charlie well, having worked with him for a long, long time. I think Charlie was really reacting to the Major League out-of-market package, which is something that Dish doesn't carry today because it comes along with an obligation to carry the MLB network. And we, without getting into much detail, it was just something that didn't make a lot of sense corporately for us. Partly because you can buy the out-of-market package from cable or satellite. I think these numbers aren't right, but the concept is close enough. For call it $149 a season. On the internet, you can buy that same product through MLB, what's it called?
MLBAM.
MLBAM. I think for $99 a product, a package. Now, it's not necessarily displayed on your big screen. It's on your internet or on your broadband connection. So my friends in cable love broadband connections, but it does clog the network a bit. So I think one of the things that we've got to think about as distributors is if the content that we're paying very good money and help originate finds its way onto an internet platform for less money, that's a bad thing, because then I'm effectively subsidizing my competition. And Major League Baseball is a good example of that. I think if the product is exactly the same on two different platforms and there's a pricing differential that's set by the content owner, that is not good for us as distributors. On the other hand, I think products like what used to be called ESPN 360, which is now called ESPN 3, also an internet-based product, gives you access to basically anything that they've licensed. That's probably okay because it's content that's not on our platform anyway. It's when they go buy a SEC rights deal, they'll put four games on the network, 8 teams. There may be 3 or 4 teams that aren't playing, so that content's available on the internet. I think that is incremental and appropriate. But I think to the extent that it's the same content on the same platform where the price point is differentiated by the content owner, that's basically, in my view, going to ultimately kill the golden goose. Because we have helped develop all of these products, cable and satellite, much more cable than satellite. Satellite, frankly, surfed on the back of cable. When I went to Dish in 1994, we just ran the same playbook that I'd run for 12 years in cable. But I think that to the extent more and more content that is paid for by consumers finds its way on either in an a la carte or lower priced, a la carte means you can just buy that particular piece of content, that disrupts a model that I think is frankly too good to disrupt. I think there's a lot of economics that flow from the distributors to the programmers to the leagues to the content owners that will change dramatically if we start seeing degradation in our own sub-bases as a result of that migration.
Here's a lively and provocative and hypothetical question for you, if you can follow all of The NFL, they theoretically own the rights to the Super Bowl. They have their own network. Could you envision a day where the NFL network is the broadcaster of the Super Bowl, charging Americans $1 to watch the Super Bowl, and an easy $120 million, perhaps, for the NFL's owners? We know there would be government intervention, but let's hear what you think anyways.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think partially because they probably make a lot more than $1 now on that particular product. And I think it's bad public policy. The Super Bowl, the World Series, March Madness, those are all, I think, sports institutions in our country, and they should be as widely distributed as possible. Will the NFL network migrate more games off of broadcast and their existing cable partners to the NFL network? They may, but again, I think it's a delicate balance because any league, you know, the numbers that we're talking about here, $20.8 billion was the last NFL contract. Again, I think they may move some product, but it's not in their best interest to move all product because I think they want you know, it's like you want to buy a house, you want more than one guy to show up. You know, you start putting everything on the NFL network, nobody's showing up to buy your goods. And I learned that in economics at St. Norbert, by the way. No, I think that it's very difficult for a rights owner to begin competing with their very broadcast outlets that have given them the kind of economics that they've seen. The NHL, I could make an argument that you could do more there because the NHL license fees from television, the broadcast deal today is basically a rev share. They put on the Winter Classic, the Stanley Cup. There's no real license fee there. They're just splitting the ad revenue between the NHL and the broadcaster. That's not the way it is in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball. They're paying a license fee to get product that is exclusive in that time slot. And to the extent you create too much competition, I think the economic model falls apart. And I think the ownership of the NFL, like the NFL Network, because it is a good product and it does have a place, and they are creating equity value. But I think taking it off of two broadcast outlets and a cable outlet like ESPN, it would not happen anytime soon.
Okay, we have a question over here in blue.
Yeah, my name is Ben. I'm from Chicago, and I come from the sports licensing business. But I have a question specifically about ESPN. With them bidding on March Madness, where do you see ESPN going? I mean, they already have, seems like a glut of inventory. I mean, they have the NBA, the NFL, MLB, NCAA, they have tons of products. Where do you see them going? They acquired the Grand Slam, they have tennis, they have golf. Where would they put March Madness? And my second question is, where do you see the NHL going? Because I don't see the growth in the NHL without being on ESPN.
So the question, if any of you missed it, was where is ESPN going, given all the content that they control? And he listed off many of the properties. I think you left out the Westminster Dog Show, but
That's on USA. I actually watched that. It's great.
yeah. But a question of where is ESPN going and where is the NHL going? So that's just kind of an update.
I can't really speak for ESPN's strategic plan, but I think ESPN's a spectacular brand, notwithstanding some of the license fees that I've had very good arguments about with the leadership of ESPN. I think ESPN, they buy a lot of rights, but they pretty much show the marquee games that most people want to watch. And I think you'll see more of that content migrate to ESPN3. I think you'll see ESPNU get better. I think you'll see greater distribution of ESPNU because I think unless you're a satellite subscriber, that's not widely distributed in the cable industry today, but it's a great college product. And you may see other ESPN brand extensions. I think, ESPN Classic, for example, I think was a product that was pretty good for a while. But now, we're just such an instant attention deficit disorder audience that I could care less seeing the Montreal Expos playing the Chicago Cubs in 2003 in an 18-inning game. So I think they've got shelf space and inventory that you'll see them improve some of the products that they already have. In terms of the NHL, I think Versus has done a wonderful job, frankly, for the NHL. And I'd like to see Versus get greater distribution, especially in hotels. I travel a lot, and I often want to watch a hockey game, and you know, it's generally not in the package.
Channel 700, I think, isn't it?
No, well, where I live, it's channel 73, but I live in a Comcast system, so it's got great channel position. Oh, and I do have Comcast, even though I'm in the dish business. You know, you got to watch the competition. But at any rate, I think I don't think the NHL needs to be on ESPN. Frankly, I think again, Versus has done a wonderful job. Their ratings are up considerably, and you know, after the strike year, there was nobody there but Versus. So I give them credit for stepping up when others didn't. And I think they've done it. Their on-air production has improved. We think there's opportunity there. Is there, you know, I mean, there's certainly people that within the NHL that would not mind a migration to ESPN. But that's really up to ESPN and kind of up to the rights fees. And from an ownership standpoint, we would be looking to maximize our revenue and to maximize our viewership and to maximize our fan experience. And I think Versus has done a pretty good job in all three of those categories. And it's up to Gary Bettman and his team to figure that out, and I think they'll do a fine job, and the NHL will continue to get better. I think the Olympics were great for the NHL this year. I think that somebody sent me a chart. It was pretty funny. I'm on the board of a company in Canada, and it was a water usage chart for the final game between the U.S. and in Canada. And the water usage went way up at every break between periods, and I think we all know what goes on in Canada. And we think that that's good for viewership and it's good for water. But at any rate, I digress. But I think that the NHL is a regional product. And I think you've seen that with what's happened in Phoenix. It's not a big secret. There's a fair number of teams that are looking for investment. So I think that the NHL will strengthen its brand locally through the regionals. I think Versus will be a nice national overlay. And if we can get more and better exposure on a national broadcast basis, that'll be a positive. I think you need to have a Winter Classic here. You know, like, I think that'd be really cool. Division III Winter Classic in Lambeau Field. And Intersport will produce it, and I'll take a fee. No, just kidding. But no, I think the Winter Classic is a great example of a product that has really captured the imagination of the fan. I mean, what they did in Chicago at Wrigley Field was really cool. What they did in Boston at Fenway Park was really great. And now they're going to do it at a college level. So I think, you know, is the NHL ever going to be in the rights fee position of the NFL and the NBA? I don't think so, because of the regional nature of the sport. But has it gotten considerably better? Yes. Do we want it as owners to get it a lot better? Absolutely. But I don't know that migrating to a different network is necessarily the right answer.
I'm going to turn this back over to you to send these people on their way. We can have another invocation if you want, kind of an evening prayer blessing. But please give a warm round of applause to one of St. Norbert's most accomplished alums, Mr. Carl Vogel.